This is a fan-made story, written by Mason Blackhouse and set 6 years after the Battle of Hogwarts. It follows Harry Potter as new shadows rise in the wizarding world. All voices are original, crafted through vocal performance and editing. AI was used for artwork and sound design. No voice cloning or actor sampling was used. This is a non-commercial project. I claim no ownership of the Harry Potter universe.
Chapter 2. Hermione. Hermione Weasley inhaled slowly, willing herself to remain calm. The polished mahogany table between her and the French minister's envoy gleamed under floating lantern light. On its glossy surface lay stacks of parchment, draft clauses, regulatory charters, and a carefully worded proposal bearing her own department's seal. It had taken all morning, but she had guided the negotiations to the brink of success. Now came the most delicate part.
As you can see,
Hermione continued in measured tones,
these provisions ensure equal protections for house elves without infringing on wizarding tradition. The Ministry of Magic in Britain has already implemented similar measures with promising results.
She kept her voice steady, diplomatic, but her eyes were bright with earnest conviction. Across from her, Director Laurent of the French Department for Magical Creature Welfare tapped a finger on the parchment, frowning thoughtfully. He was an older wizard, with thinning silver hair and a skeptical air that had challenged her since the moment she arrived. A half-dozen advisors hovered behind him like wary birds. Beside Hermione sat her young assistant, Hana Song, quill poised above a notebook. Hana's quill trembled slightly. Whether from nerves or excitement, Hermione wasn't sure.
Director Laurent cleared his throat.
Madame Weasley,
He said in deeply accented English.
I admit your arguments are compelling. But you must understand, in France, our house elf policies have remained unchanged for centuries. Many old families will not accept reforms so easily.
He slid the parchment back toward Hermione.
Granting elves a stipend, allowing them to apply for freedom, it is unprecedented.
His tone was cautious, but not as dismissive as it had been at the start of their meeting. Hermione allowed herself a small, polite smile. This wasn't a flat refusal. It was the opening she needed.
I do understand,
She replied, folding her hands neatly atop the table.
Change can be unsettling, but it's also necessary. These beings have served faithfully for generations. They deserve basic protections at the very least. Britain's own House Elf Welfare Act
She tapped a clause on the proposal.
has already dramatically reduced mistreatment. We've seen happier elves, healthier families, even increased productivity in some households. When these beings are treated well, everyone benefits.
She leaned forward slightly, meeting the director's gaze.
I believe France, with its proud tradition of liberty and justice, could lead Western Europe in this progress. If we work together on this legislation, we might inspire the rest of the International Confederation of Wizards to follow suit.
Her voice warmed with quiet passion.
Imagine Monsieur Laurent, an international standard for the fair treatment of magical creatures. It would be a legacy to be proud of.
Laurent's stern expression faltered. Hermione watched as his eyes drifted to the parchment again. Silence stretched in the high-ceilinged conference room. On the walls, enchanted tapestries of magical creatures from French lore stood witness. Unicorns, embroidered in silver thread, pranced through a moonlit forest on one tapestry, while another depicted a family of house elves quietly polishing wands in an old chateau kitchen. A soft rain pattered against the tall arched windows, blurring the late autumn afternoon light. Hermione could hear the faint scratching of Hana's quill as her assistant faithfully recorded minutes, and the muffled tick of an ornate clock in the corner. Her heart thudded in her chest.
This is it,
She thought. The moment everything might change. At last, Laurent exhaled and gave a single decisive nod.
Très bien. I will recommend that the Minister of Magic support these guidelines, at least on a trial basis.
He conceded. A smile ghosted across his lips as he added,
Your reputation for persuasion is well earned, Madame Weasley. You argue as effectively as, how do you say, a war veteran negotiating peace.
Hermione's shoulders eased with relief.
We did it.
She thought, extending her hand across the table.
Thank you, Director Laurel. I deeply appreciate your open-mindedness.
He shook her hand firmly. Around him, his advisers exchanged surprised, even approving glances. It was clear many had not expected the young British witch to win their traditionalist director over. Hermione felt a surge of triumph, not flashy or exuberant, but quiet and profound. She wasn't casting spells or dueling dark wizards today. She was using diplomacy and reason to make the world better. And it worked. This was the kind of victory she had fought for, the kind that kept peace after the war's end. As they began wrapping up, chatting amicably now about timelines and joint announcements, Hermione caught Hana's eye. Her assistant beamed, practically glowing with pride. Hermione suppressed a grin and gave the girl a subtle nod of thanks. Hana had been invaluable, fetching references from the department's archives and drafting translations of key terms. Though only a year out of Hogwarts, she had a keen mind and a heart that brimmed with compassion for magical creatures. A clerk hurried in with a tea service to celebrate the accord. Porcelain cups clinked, filling the room with the aroma of Earl Grey and honey. Hermione accepted a steaming cup gratefully. As Laurent's team conversed in rapid French, Hana sidled closer to Hermione, her whisper barely above a breath.
That was brilliant, Mrs. Weasley.
She said, brown eyes shining behind her square spectacles.
I can't believe you convinced him. I thought he'd throw us out after he called the clause about voluntary clothing allowance absurd.
Hermione chuckled softly, keeping her voice low.
He nearly did. Honestly, for a moment I thought I'd have to cite every precedent since the International Warlock Convention of 1709.
There was a playful glint in her eyes now that the tension had broken. She sipped her tea and added,
But remember, Hannah, even the prickliest officials have their reasons. Director Laurent was worried about backlash at home. Once we addressed how gradual implementation could appease the old families, he began to see the merits.
Hana nodded eagerly, tucking a stray strand of silky black hair behind her ear.
Right, the compromise on a trial period. That was clever.
She hesitated, then blurted,
I hope I can handle situations like that one day. You were so poised.
Hermione smiled in earnest now and gently touched Hana's arm.
You will, Hannah. I see a lot of potential in you.
The young witch reminded Hermione of herself at that age, determined, idealistic, and a touch impatient. More than once during the talks, Hermione had noticed Hana bristling at some dismissive comment from the other side, just as Hermione herself might have done as a teenager. It had taken Hermione years, and the crucible of war, to learn the art of tempering passion with patience. Now she could pass a bit of that wisdom on. They stayed a while longer in the conference room, discussing next steps. Hermione outlined how she would brief Minister Shacklebolt and the British Wizengamot, and how Laurent's office might announce their cooperative effort in the Magique Gazette. Hana diligently noted every detail, though occasionally her quill doodled little excited stars in the margins of her notebook. Outside, the drizzle had ceased. Hermione glanced at the window. Evening was creeping in, a violet tint to the cloudy sky. A pang of longing hit her unexpectedly. She thought of her shared flat back in London, of Ron, likely just getting home from the joke shop, perhaps starting tea or reading the Daily Prophet at the kitchen table. They had only been apart for 3 days, but she missed him dearly.
Nearly done here.
She promised herself. One day of taking in Paris, relaxation, and then home. At last, the meeting adjourned. Hermione exchanged farewells and courteous bows with the French delegation. Hana carefully gathered their parchments and files into a satchel.
We'll celebrate properly once we're back.
Hermione murmured to her assistant as they stepped out into the marble corridor. Hana grinned, hugging the leather satchel to her chest. The corridor of the French Ministry's international wing was grand and echoing. Crystal chandeliers floated overhead, illuminating gilded mouldings and tall portrait frames. As they walked towards the lifts, one portrait, a witch in rococo dress walking a pair of pygmy dragons on leashes, waved at them. Hermione gave a polite nod in return, her heels clicking briskly on the parquet floor. She felt invigorated. This diplomatic mission had been a resounding success. It was the culmination of years of effort since the war. Hermione had poured herself into rewriting laws, uplifting the downtrodden and healing injustices that had festered for centuries. It was rewarding, meaningful work. Quiet work compared to the battlefield of her youth, but perhaps just as important in securing the peace they'd fought for. Hana pressed the call button for the lift, practically bouncing on her toes.
I can't wait to tell my mom.
She whispered excitedly.
She won't believe I got to sit in on this. She always said change at the French ministry was hopeless, but, well, you did it.
Hermione laughed lightly.
Be sure to give yourself credit too. Your briefing notes were a lifesaver.
The lift doors slid open with a soft chime and they stepped in. Hermione flipped through her own notebook, already thinking ahead.
When we're back at the suite, let's assemble our notes for Kingsley's office. He'll want a full report by tomorrow morning. Of course.
Hana chirped, then bit her lip.
After that, will you be heading home early? You mentioned your husband's birthday is soon, right? I recall you said you wanted time to plan something.
The lift began its smooth ascent to the atrium level, and Hermione saw Hana give her a hopeful sideways glance. In truth, Hana was probably exhausted, and hoping for a bit of rest after their travels, and Hermione had promised her an afternoon off once the talks were done. Hermione's expression softened.
It's not that soon. Ron's birthday's in March, though I do like to plan ahead.
She said with a teasing lilt.
Still, there's plenty of time yet. And I did promise you a bit of time off today, didn't I? Why don't you take tomorrow morning? You've more than earned it.
Hana opened her mouth to protest, but Hermione gave her a kind but firm look that left no room for argument.
Truly, you've been working flat out. Take a lie-in, curl up with a good book.
She knew full well that, like herself, Hana found her peace in stories, letting words leap from the page to shape whole worlds in her mind. They stepped into the lift and began their descent to the atrium. Hermione leaned back against the brass rail, allowing herself for just a moment to imagine a quiet evening. She was due to stay one more day in Paris, a short pocket of time carved out for herself after weeks of meetings. She had circled a few exhibits at the Musée de Cluny and had her eye on a quiet little bistro near the Sorbonne for supper. Perhaps a warm bowl of soupe à l'oignon, a glass of red wine, and time to scribble a few notes for Kingsley in peace. A small reward. For once, there was no one waiting with urgent parchment in hand. She could simply be. The lift opened into the grand atrium of the French Ministry of Magic. Witches and wizards bustled about under a dome painted like a twilight sky. Golden light from ornate street lamp-style sconces glinted off the polished ebony floor and the fountain at the centre, which featured bronze statues of a hippogriff and a wizard bowing to one another with courtly grace. Normally, Hermione might have paused to admire the detail, the hippogriff's wings outstretched in mid-dip, the wizard's head lowered respectfully. But her thoughts were already straying to the Latin Quarter, to quiet cobbled streets and lantern-lit windows and a night without obligation. She and Hana passed through the security checkpoint and made their way toward the row of international flue fireplaces along the far wall. Hermione wasn't leaving quite yet, but she meant to confirm their scheduled return for the following evening. Before she could reach the scheduling desk, however, a flurry of motion overhead caught her eye. A brown owl was sweeping through the atrium's enchanted dome, wings stark against the painted stars. Hermione barely had time to register the familiar flash of white on its chest before it dove. The owl swooped low and dropped a tightly rolled parchment directly into her waiting hand. Hermione's heart skipped. An owl finding her here. Only a handful of people knew she was in Paris on this mission. The most likely was... She unfurled the parchment and immediately recognized Harry's neat handwriting. Alongside a short note was a clipping from the front page of the Daily Prophet, its headline in bold black letters, "Mass Breakout from Azkaban." Hermione's breath caught. She felt the blood drain from her face as her eyes raced over the clipping. Lestrange. Azkaban's impenetrable security, deadly riot. Names leapt out at her in horrible clarity. Rodolphus and Rabastan Lestrange, escaped. Amicus Carrow, dead. Alecto Carrow, dead. Dolores Umbridge, dead. For a moment the bustling atrium fell away. Hermione stood frozen, the noise around her reduced to a dull buzz. She read and reread one paragraph, hardly aware that her hands were trembling.
The Lestrange brothers both serving life sentences for their roles as high-ranking Death Eaters. Now at large and considered extremely dangerous.
Rodolphus and Rabastan Lestrange. Hermione's vision wavered as memories surged. She pictured the cruel sneers of Death Eaters in dark cloaks, heard again the echo of Bellatrix Lestrange's mad cackle as Hermione lay bruised on the floor of Malfoy Manor, the word mudblood carved into her skin. That nightmarish day had been Bellatrix's doing, but her husband Rodolphus had been right there at the Battle of Hogwarts, hurling lethal curses at any who crossed his path. His brother Rabastan had nearly killed Ron during the Department of Mysteries battle years ago. Ron had never forgotten the jagged wound from a curse that narrowly missed his heart. And of course, both Lestranges had tortured Neville's parents into insanity. Neville. Oh, God. Hermione's stomach churned with a sudden, sick worry. If those fanatics were free, who would they target next?
Hermione?
Hannah's voice sounded distant and thin. Hermione blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. Her assistant was peering at her with wide, alarmed eyes.
Mrs. Weasley, what's wrong? You're white as a sheet.
Hermione swallowed, realizing her throat had gone dry. She carefully rolled the newspaper clipping around Harry's note, hands still unsteady.
There's been an incident at home.
She managed quietly. She didn't want to alarm Hannah, but neither could she lie or downplay this. The news would be everywhere soon enough.
Azkaban prison. There's been a breakout. Very dangerous convicts on the loose.
Hannah gasped softly. Even having grown up after the war, she knew the weight of that name.
Azkaban. But no one's escaped since.
She trailed off, comprehension and fear dawning on her face.
Who?
She whispered. Hermione glanced around. A few passers-by were eyeing them curiously now. She pulled Hannah aside to a quieter alcove beneath a marble arch, lowering her voice.
The Lestrange brothers,
she said. Just uttering the name made her feel exposed, as if saying it might summon those fiends out of thin air.
They're out. There was some kind of riot. The Carrows are dead. Umbridge too.
Hannah clapped a hand over her mouth, eyes wide behind her glasses.
Merlin's beard.
The Lestranges. Professor Longbottom mentioned them in herbology during his first year teaching. Everyone kept pestering him about the Battle of Hogwarts. He said a little about his parents, so they're the ones who... Tortured his parents, yes,
Hermione said grimly. She drew a sharp breath, steadying herself against the storm of emotion rising in her chest. Dread, anger, disbelief, all of it crashing through her at once. 6 years of peace, she thought bitterly. 6 years rebuilding, healing, believing the worst was behind them, and now, in an instant, the past had torn straight through the present. It was a warning. Harry's note said as much. She hadn't even read the personal message yet, but she didn't need to. She knew Harry. If he'd sent this to her, it meant he believed something was coming, something terrible, and he wanted them ready. Hana stepped closer and asked in a small voice,
What do we do?
She was looking to Hermione not just as a boss now, but as a famed member of Dumbledore's army, one of the war veterans who had faced these monsters before. The younger witch was clearly frightened. Hermione put a hand on Hannah's shoulder.
We go home.
Hermione said firmly.
Right now.
The urgency in her own voice surprised her. Home suddenly felt like the most important place in the world to be. Ron. She had to get to Ron. Was he safe? Did he even know yet? The prophet clipping in her hand answered that. Harry must have sent him one too. She imagined Ron finding out, perhaps in the middle of tending the shop, trying to stay calm. No, he'd be worried sick about her once he learned she was still abroad with all this happening.
I have to get back,
she thought. Hermione guided Hannah towards the international flu desk, her mind already moving a mile a minute.
I'm sorry to cut our trip short,
she said, trying for a reassuring tone, despite her racing pulse.
This is a matter of national security. I'll arrange for us to fly directly into the Ministry of Magic in London. From there, you should head straight home to your family. I'll take responsibility for the paperwork later.
Hannah clutched the satchel nervously.
Mrs. Weasley, if there's anything I can do...
You've done more than enough.
Hermione interrupted gently. She forced a calm smile.
And please, just call me Hermione. Listen, Hannah, this is likely to cause a bit of chaos. The ministry will be in an uproar. You should be with your loved ones.
She thought of Hannah's family, Korean immigrants as well as Muggles who settled in the city of Galway, on the west coast of Ireland, if she recalled correctly. They might not even know much about Azkaban or the war, but Hannah did, and that was enough to scare her. Hermione squeezed her shoulder.
I'll be fine. I just need to meet with some colleagues and figure out how to help.
Hannah's eyes glistened with worry, but she nodded.
Okay, if you're sure.
She hesitated, then added in a rush.
Be careful, Hermione.
Dropping the honorific was her attempt at familiarity, and it touched Hermione.
Those men, the Lestranges. They're the worst of the worst, right?
A flash of memory, a high, cold laugh, and a blaze of green light during the Battle of Hogwarts as one Lestrange brother went down under a hail of spells. The other dragged him away through the smoke, both dueling viciously. They hadn't been subdued easily. Hermione bit back a shiver.
They're extremely dangerous, but the auras will be on it, and Harry...
Her voice caught for a second on her friend's name.
Harry's one of the best. We defeated them, and much worse once. We'll do it again.
Those words came out more confidently than she felt. Still, Hannah looked somewhat reassured. Together they hurried to the flu attendant to secure immediate passage. The attendant, a harried-looking witch with ink-stained sleeves, jumped in surprise when Hermione flashed her ministry identification and explained the emergency. Within minutes they were granted priority use of one of the large gilt fireplaces that lined the wall. Emerald flames roared to life, wide enough for two. Hermione turned to Hannah before they stepped in.
Remember, take tomorrow off, see your parents, and owl me in the evening. Let me know you're all right, will you?
I will.
Hannah promised. She tried to muster a smile.
Thank you, Hermione.
Hermione pulled the younger witch into a brief hug.
I'll see you soon. Everything's going to be okay.
She hoped she sounded convincing. With a final nod, Hermione released her, and together they strode into the green flames. Hermione threw down a pinch of flue powder and called out,
Ministry of Magic, London.
The world whirled away in a rush of green fire. Hermione kept a firm grip on the satchel and on Hannah's arm as they sped through the flue network. With a whoosh, they stumbled out into the atrium of the British Ministry. It was like stepping into another storm. The usually calm atrium was buzzing with frantic energy. Ministry workers hurried in clumps, clutching Evening Prophet editions and talking in hushed, urgent tones. The grand golden fountain of magical brethren at the centre gushed water over its bronze wizarding statues, but its gentle tinkling was drowned out by the echo of raised voices. Hermione's arrival drew a few looks. Several people recognized her at once, but no one paused to chat. Everyone seemed too preoccupied. Aurors with stern faces were positioned by the flue exits, verifying identities and ushering people along. Hermione's eyes immediately sought out the tallest of them, hoping for a glimpse of Harry's unruly black hair or Ron's lanky form, but neither were there. Hana inhaled sharply beside her, taking in the tense scene. A dishevelled wizard in the dark navy robes of magical law enforcement brushed past them, nearly spilling a vial of what looked like shimmering map coordinates. He didn't even apologize, muttering instead to a colleague,
Level 2 is absolute chaos right now. Shacklebolt's called an emergency meeting, and every aura's been summoned.
Hermione's stomach tightened. It made sense. In a crisis of this magnitude, the Minister and the Aura Office would scramble a response team immediately.
Harry must be with Kingsley and the Aurors,
she thought. Perhaps he'd sent that owl to her and Ron just before diving into action. She knew him. He'd want to do everything at once if he could. She turned to Hana, raising her voice over the din.
This is where we part. Flew home directly, all right?
She gestured to the fireplaces for domestic destinations.
If anyone stops you, show them my ID, my badge, and say I sent you home on urgent business.
Hana clutched the satchel and nodded.
Okay.
She looked like she wanted to say more, but instead she merely managed,
Please be careful, and good luck.
Hermione mustered a reassuring smile.
I'll be fine. Go on now.
With one last worried glance, Hana hurried off toward the queue of fireplaces, disappearing amid a cluster of witches. Hermione watched just long enough to see Hana step into the green flames and vanish. Only then did she allow her own composure to waver. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. She was alone now, in the middle of a storm she had hoped never to see again, and she needed to get to Ron. Hermione navigated through the atrium crowd, gently dodging a gesticulating wizard from the Department of Magical Transportation who seemed on the verge of a panic attack. The lift gates were jammed open with the sheer volume of people going up and down. Apparate instead, Hermione decided. She made for a recessed alcove near the visitor's entrance, one of several designated disapparition points installed after the war. Warded for safety, and fitted with a charm that logged each departure by name and destination, it automatically relayed the information to the Department of Magical Transportation for record-keeping and security clearance. Clutching the rolled profit clipping tightly, Hermione stepped into the circle, spun on the spot, and vanished with a sharp crack. An instant later she appeared on the quiet twilight of a residential London street. A chilly drizzle had started again, misting her face. Dusk was falling, the street lamps flickering to life with hazy halos in the damp air. Hermione didn't pause to admire the familiar row of tidy brick facades. She hurried along the pavement until she reached a particular building, cozy and unassuming, with a blue door and flower boxes on the sill. She and Ron had moved into this flat 3 years ago, a modest place but theirs, filled with hand-me-down furniture, hearts brimming with love and hopes of filling it with children when the time was right. Through the curtains, a warm light glowed. Hermione's heart thumped with relief. Ron's home. She practically flew up the steps and unlocked the door with unsteady fingers. Pushing it open, Hermione stepped inside their flat. The scent of home enfolded her at once. A mix of Ron's favourite roast dinner — he must have reheated leftovers — and a trace of the sweet, smoky aroma of Wheezy's products that often clung to his clothes. The small entryway opened directly into the living area. She pushed open the door.
We hope you have enjoyed this latest chapter of Harry Potter and the Shadows of Azkaban. New chapters released weekly, unless delayed. And new original stories will also be coming soon, so stay tuned. And, as always, cheerio, and keep your wands at the ready.